What is up, Doomies? Welcome to my episode 5 recap, review, and breakdown of season 4, episode 5 of Doom Patrol, even though I just said episode 5. This is Youth Patrol, and I'd like to think that everyone thought that this was one of those Doom Patrol episodes. And what I mean by one of those is that it had all the craziness, the wackiness, the spectacularness of Doom Patrol, but most importantly, mixed with a couple of emotional packing punches. I think this has been my favorite episode, as I mentioned in my no spoilers review, out of the 6 that I got to see. And yeah, just to let everyone know, episode 6 is similar to Titans with regards to they'll be going on break and then coming back with the remaining episodes sometime in 2023. For example, Titans isn't coming back in January, so hopefully February or March. And that just makes you think when Doom Patrol could return. Getting towards the end of the year now, we'll be fully ramping up into the content again in January. But let's get into this. Leave the video a like if you're going to enjoy it. And right at the beginning, we pick up with Larry meditating, and this is because he's searching for Keeg. So even with Keeg missing, he still has that connection to him, which is why he was getting flashes of Mr. 104, because we can't forget how Keeg completely yeeted himself into Mr. 104. But meanwhile, with Jane, again, Doom Patrol, you're making me review some hard things. God, why did I have to use that word? Because of the YouTube, guidelines won't allow me to talk about this. But let's just say she's looking at Shelley's puzzle piece and she's having a good time while getting baked, if you know what I mean. The thing is, she wakes up in the underground and she's absolutely mortified. But ironically, she kind of drops herself in it because none of them knew what she was on about. To be fair, I don't know if they did even find out what she did. But yeah, that was pretty funny because Jane, was just kind of teleported there. We don't really know why she went down there, actually. Meanwhile, with Cliff, we have him be given the car by Rouge, which I thought was really thoughtful. Rouge this season, even though she is Madame Rouge, she has a bit of a darker nature to her. It's really about making amends. And, you know, with Cliff, I think that still counts for her because, as we know in the past, she's labeled people weapons at the Bureau. And Cliff, with his sense of touch when he killed Darren Jones, that really messed him up. Obviously, it's a lot easier to kill when you haven't felt for many, many decades and everything like that. So we saw that guilt overtaking her when Cliff was feeling really messed up when he was about to kill the butt. That's something I do need to remind you guys of. That butt still hasn't been killed. It's just still remaining frozen in that little box that Jane and Vic brought back a couple of episodes ago. But this is when Mark freaking Sheppard popped up as Kipling. I think many people agree with me here with regards to any time Kipling shows up. Maybe it's just my bias for Mark Sheppard. I've watched him for years, you know, when I was a lot younger with Supernatural, and just seeing him in this, he just fits so well. I was over the moon, and he makes this episode just 10 times better on top of everything else that's going on. And of course, it continues the story as we're getting more into the Immortus thread, because he, at the end of that one episode with the Knights Templar, was warned by Bunbury that Immortus is rising, and he's here now to tell the team because, as he said himself, just like everything else in this goddamn universe, it all leads back to you. But while this was all happening in the background, this is when Rita wakes up and she is absolutely freaking out because for the first time since her accident, she is aging. And that's because in the Rita Farr retrospective, when she wore the amulet, as many of you guessed in the comment section, her longevity, as we're now calling it, the immortality aspect of her, has left her. Like, it's being collected, and as we learn in this episode, Immortus is requiring that back. Kipling explains to the team that Immortus is something very big, very dangerous, and it's far more dangerous than anything that these Bellends have faced before. Again, love how the Doom Patrol are just laughing at this insane threat that is coming their way. Kipling thought that it was just a legend about an ancient forgotten god, and he explains exactly kind of what Immortus is. So this is what's making me, even having seen episode 6, I don't really know. Is it going to be like Doom Patrol's iteration of General Immortus? I mean, obviously Immortus is in the name, so maybe there will be aspects of that, but will it literally be General Immortus, like the old wrinkly kind of military get-up guy? I don't know, because Kipling describes Immortus as an interdimensional deity capable of swallowing the entirety of existence as a whole. So I don't know if that will be the case that we see General Immortus. And this is where we get into some of the backstory in Doom Patrol's adaptation of this whole Immortus project, and that's because Rouge, of course, having worked at the Bureau before, remembers that there was an Immortus project, some kind of experiment or pursuit of immortality, and it had to do with Niles Caulder, as we've gone over in previous videos now. And that Immortus project was indeed the Doom Patrol members. And the very talisman that Chief had was a piece of Immortus that apparently he shaved down a little bit and thus gave to the Doom Patrol in an experiment to make them live longer, because obviously if he could achieve that, the whole purpose of it, as we know, is that, well, he could in turn give immortality to himself, or at least live one more day than his daughter Dorothy. But as we know, he gave that talisman up to Kipling. I guess Kipling sold it on, and that's when Kipling even says in this moment that there was a break-in at Horst Eisman's, and the only thing that was stolen out of millions of dollars worth of things there was the necklace. Now, we know that this was Dorothy and the Dead Boy detectives, but regardless, Torminox got the necklace, the piece of Immortus, and returned it to the followers of Immortus, as we saw at the end of last episode. Anyway, though, with Rita freaking out, she goes into Niles Caulder's office with all kinds of things there, thinking that maybe you would have a way to de-age her, and she literally opens a box labeled experimental, untested, and dangerous, finds this little kind of scarab potion, which turns out to be this curse, and when she bumps into Cliff, all the Doom Patrol members get dosed in it, this little cloudy fog, and thus they start de-aging up until the point where they'll be teenagers, kids, children, and as Cliff puts it, they'll be jizzified. And this is where Youth Patrol really begins. I absolutely loved seeing Cyborg with braces. We have 1937 version of Rita, and of course with Kipling, he is follically gifted. He has a long set of gorgeous hair, and so the Doom Patrol are in a bit of trouble because, again, they'll keep de-aging up until they literally don't exist. And so Kipling, as a result, wants to search for his old mentors, Miss April's teleporting tea room, to help them out of this mess, and this allows this episode to go into a bit of a road trip mode. They use Cliff's new car and they turn up at the petrol station, and this is, yeah, truly where things start going all different directions, because this whole time they're getting younger and younger, not necessarily physically yet, but in spirit and in mentality, or should I say maturity. So Cyborg is getting all the kind of teenage metabolism munchies. We have Cliff and Jane spot some teenagers who are getting baked and they want some of that, but they need to go in and get some alcohol. As a result, they go back to the car, they call Kipling a virgin, and they basically persuade him to go to the party. Rita and Rouge wander off to have their own separate storyline this episode that turns into just such an amazing moment later on. And when they head to the party, it couldn't have been complemented by a better song, My Chemical Romance's Teenagers. Cliff is going off, like really getting involved, everyone's dancing. We have a moment between Vic and Jane, and we have Vic touching upon how he feels like he's lost that aspect of his friendship with his old friends, but Jane kind of reassures him that she'd do anything to get that back if she had that. He sees himself in the distance, or at least his younger version of himself and his friends. We have Kipling like truly enjoying himself. I just love little moments like that when the camera just cuts to Kipling smoking and just enjoying the party. But then we get that moment eventually where Jane is still getting baked, but she kind of has this like isolated moment in the party. And this was quite a significant moment for her, because the whole thing regarding Jane this season is obviously everyone's finding their purpose, and her purpose has only been about protecting the girl so far. She's felt very reluctant to kind of live her own life in a body that she doesn't view as hers, because she's primary and this is Kay's body. So in this moment there was this very profound scene, and I absolutely adored the cinematography in this moment, just the way the camera was, the psychedelic aspect to it, because I guess Jane was high. But at the same time, as she approached Kay, she started apologizing. She says, I shouldn't really be thinking about Shelley or anyone else, or treating this body like it's mine. It's not mine, it's yours. But that's when Kay says to her, it's our body, Jane. So she's kind of really trying to let Jane know that you can live your life and not feel guilty about, yes, you're primary, you already have control, but you don't feel like you truly have control because you feel like this body has never been yours. But Kay is basically saying, as much as this body is mine, it is also yours. So now Jane can kind of accept that and really start to live her own life and explore that even more without any of the guilt that she's already been feeling. And that's just such a big chapter in Crazy Jane's story across all of the seasons of Doom Patrol so far. Again, like for seasons, she has been a vessel in this body, but never truly feeling like it is, you know, something she can actually take charge of truly. It's always been in service of just protecting. But now, hey, how about I actually truly do embrace this being as mine, not just, I don't know, a bodyguard of sorts. And that can really start to open up a journey for Jane, which could lead down so many different roads now that she can actually start to really see a future for herself that isn't just solely about having one purpose, and that is being a safeguard for this body and K chalice. And then, of course, we have Kipling and Jane turn into kids. That's when K, technically, because it's the perfect age for it, takes the role. And I thought she did a great job at trying to, emulate the older version of Jane. But let's talk a little bit about Larry and Mr. 104's story. Now, I actually really, really like this. If there's one thing that Larry, I think, has as a purpose, that is to find a connection outside of the negative spirit, or in this case, Keeg, outside of his, I suppose, best friendship with Rita. I think he's always longed for something he feels like he can never have, and that is a connection with someone else. Actually, love. Obviously, his radiation quite literally prevents that, and what better person than what is clearly being teased here, a romance between Larry and Mr. 104. So initially, when he journeys to Mr. 104, he passes out. They go back to the cabin. When they're in this kind of state, Larry sees that Mr. 104 used to be at the ant farm exactly like Larry, and they forced Mr. 104 to use his air augmentation to kill the agents of the Bureau. While this is happening as well, we have some moments when they're conscious. Mr. 104 is saying, I've been trying to make Keeg go, but he just won't leave. And that's something I find really beautiful about this as well. All of this, like, Keeg eventually leaves at the end of all of these scenes. Like, all of this was orchestrated by Keeg so that Larry could have a connection or start to build that with someone else. Like, this was all a little kind of romantic organization thing from little Keeg, and that is really, really sweet. And that's when we get that moment where Mr. 104 was viewing what Larry had to go through, and, that's obviously him killing the Bureau agents in a very similar way. We have him really trying to reassure him, because obviously this is insanely traumatic. He's reliving the trauma of his past, and he's trying to tell him to breathe, and that he's got this he's using his powers to cloak himself from Larry's radiation. He says that I can turn my skin to lead, you can't hurt me. And I don't know, there was just that look in Larry's face, that the way the scene was portrayed by both actors here, Sendil Ramamurthy and obviously Matt Bomer under the makeup, it was just, I don't know, there was something quite profound about it. It's hard for me to articulate. I think it's just knowing that both characters, Larry and this new character, Mr. 104, could have really found something here, and I really do dig it. And the way the episode edited it, when they're slightly touching hands outside the dreamscape, I stand this. I don't care what anyone says. I don't see how you can't. It's fantastic stuff. So on top of all of these emotional moments with Jane and then Larry and Mr. 104, then they have to lay it on even more thick with freaking Rouge and Rita reconciling. But this was so artfully done again. We have Rita in child mode, because at this point everyone is literally turned into a kid. The only reason Rouge hasn't is because of her powers. And so this is when they really start to hash it out. Initially Rita's, again being Rita to Rouge, but that's when Rouge talks about losing people for when they found out about her power. They didn't really react in the way you would kind of like them to. She goes on to talk about having this hope of ever really finding a true meaningful connection. Then that leads them down the road of, well, we used to have that. Rita mentions how they used to be good friends, didn't we? You were the one person who made me feel like everything was going to be okay, and I miss that. I miss you. But you hurt me, and I'm never going to get that back again. And it's true. She really did. We can't forget about the events of Doom Patrol Season 3. She got Malcolm killed. She completely betrayed the sisterhood. It is borderline irredeemable stuff, which makes this scene so rich in what the characters are experiencing here. Because even though Rita knows that, and we've seen her hold this grudge, deep down, she would love nothing more than to kind of erase that and just be back where she was in the sisterhood days, because we can't forget as well, they spent years and years together in the past. That's why when Rita came back, it was really weird for her, because she hadn't seen the Doom Patrol in a very long time. And this scene with Michelle Gomez and her performance, damn, that really got me teared up. Like, it really did. I almost get too emotional if I speak too much about it now, but when she started getting into I don't deserve an ounce of forgiveness and I never will, I'm so sorry, Rita, and just how she's been trying to somehow make up for it, but knowing she never really could this whole time, this whole season so far, and then it all amounting up to this conversation, and then how you have little Rita just kind of put her arm around Rouge, and then the camera cuts, and then Rouge has become so vulnerable that she's taken off the power that made her appear as the older Rouge, and now you have little Rouge and little Rita just hugging it out and crying and just... yeah, it speaks for itself. It was just, this is what I mean by what I teased at the beginning of the video. It is one of those Doom Patrol episodes, and what I mean by one of those is one of the standout episodes. Meanwhile, with little Jane and little Kipling, they're trying to get Cliff to leave, but he doesn't really want to. He's just really involved in the party and he just wants to have fun because he's been feeling really crappy recently. And the reason why this whole argument kind of started out with Jane kind of going mad at him, why would you choose these party people over your friends? Well, Cliff is just like actual friends who don't even ask if I'm doing okay. And that's because, you know, he's been struggling ever since he got that touchback. As we've discussed already, he's been feeling pretty messed up about it. And speaking about feeling messed up, we have Vic, who feels pretty bad about what Derek said at laser tag. He goes to his apartment as a kid, and just imagine being Derek in this moment. Can you actually imagine that? And he just hugs him. So I guess we're going to get a continuation of this very, very soon. Back with Larry and Mr. 104, Larry learns a little bit more about why Mr. 104 pledged to Immortus, and that's all because he's trying to reverse his condition. The things that his body can do, they're taking a toll apparently, and there's misfires, changing compositions, and one day he might not be able to control it, and if that day comes, it can cause a mass extinction event. And so to avoid that, well, you fulfill your pledge to Immortus. But Larry's just like, I know a devil's bargain when I see one. There's gotta be another way. But this is when Larry got freaking taken through a portal. But it's like these scissors started opening it up. Again, I can't really say too much from what I've seen of the next episode, but as you can tell, leading up to episode 6, which is going to be the part 1 finale, if you will, before we get part 2, it's really leading up to something kind of big with regards to this larger looming threat of Immortus. Now, the episode ends very interestingly as well. We have the Knights Templar arrive, and they're just basically taking the piss out of Kipling. Even Bunbury is completely ripping into him. I love the subtitles whenever they pop up. And so Kipling returns back to Kipling mode from Kid Kipling. And interestingly, we see Bunbury go over to Jane, who's now a baby. And we see that Kipling's quite concerned. And this intrigues me as well. I don't know if it's been made clear, if it does get made clear in the next episode. I can't really remember. But Kipling says to Bunbury, just take what you need and be done with it. And this is when Bunbury takes Jane's longevity. And I don't really understand why, because they were worried about Immortus rising, right? And if Immortus rises, in that whole scene in the Knights Templar, like, they're basically saying this will be the end of days, we're all absolutely screwed if this happens. So why would Bunbury, who kind of leads that group, take the longevity, which I can only assume is to give it to Immortus, or maybe they just want to safeguard Jane's longevity so Immortus doesn't get it? I don't know, because, yeah, it just seems a bit contradictory if Bunbury takes it to only give it to Immortus and thus cause the very thing that they don't want to happen, and that is the complete desolation of everything, as we had Kipling tease earlier at Doom Manor. And so the episode ends, and this isn't good, because now Jane's longevity is gone. They've also got the necklace, thanks to Tom and Ox last episode. Then we have Rita's longevity gone. Now we've had Larry abducted for a portal, so you have to assume that could mean his immortality or longevity is in danger. So it looks like Immortus could very well rise. So I would love to know what you thought of this episode. Again, my overall review and thoughts on it is that, you know, it still pertained to the main plot quite heavily, actually, whilst still maintaining a wacky kind of side adventure. And that seems to be the way Doom Patrol does it. Like, you have the larger plot threads of the overall season still very much so involved, even if it's sometimes less than other episodes, such as last episode. You had the Danizens and that whole story with Space Case, but even at the end of the episode, obviously Tom and Ox got the necklace from Dorothy. But this episode goes back to the more conventional, okay, let's do a really weird My Greatest Adventure comic book bizarre run in this episode. They go on a party, they're in youth patrol mode, but throughout it you have these profound character moments, these developments for their personal arcs, and then you still have really large things happening, such as the longevity, learning more about that, why Immortus will rise if he gets his longevity. So I would say that this episode had all the ingredients in the cake tin, and it baked out beautifully as one of the standout episodes of Doom Patrol so far, in my opinion. As for the promo for next episode, you're probably seeing on screen right now. I can't really break it down in too much detail because, again, I've seen it, but I just thought I would show it to you guys so you know what is coming your way with a little bit of a tease in the part 1 finale. So everyone, let me know everything you thought. Let me know your theories for next episode. How do you think things are going to cut off before we return with part 2 sometime in 2023? If you enjoyed this video, would really appreciate a like. As always, it really helps me grow. Maybe consider subscribing for not only more Doom Patrol content, but other nerdy, geeky content that I'm sure you'll enjoy on the channel. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Doomies in the next video. Goodbye.